Most of us have taken a personality test at some point, but how much can a test really tell you about who you are? Melissa and I talk identity, career changes, and what we learned after retaking a personality test 1 year later. Welcome to the second episode of Life Happens and Then You Die. Life Happens and Then You Die is a podcast where we talk about life and all its weird, difficult, funny, uncomfortable, and beautiful things. We cover personal growth, relationships, identity, grief, healing, all the fun stuff, the lessons we learn the hard way, and things that nobody really prepares you for, and of course, some fun topics to really get to know ourselves. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Melissa.
Today we're going to start with something fun. Melissa, I'll let you kick it off.
All right. So today I want to answer one question to kick us off here. And it's, if you could describe yourself in one word, what would it be? And for me personally, the first word that comes to mind is organized. I feel like it describes me to a T. I'm just like the most organized person you will ever meet.
I can actually attest to that. Melissa is one of the most organized people I've ever met in my entire life. I genuinely don't know how she does it.
I don't know. I feel like it's just first nature for me.
Yeah, I really struggled with that question. Trying to define yourself in one word feels almost impossible.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer, right? Like, because we're so much more than just one thing. So how could you possibly describe yourself in just one word?
And honestly, I think that's part of the problem. Sometimes it can be a little dangerous to reduce yourself down to something that simple. People don't really work like that. And it's not just how we describe ourselves, it shows up in things like personality tests too. I didn't realize how much that was affecting me until things started to change. So, about a year ago, we both left our previous jobs.
Yeah, we left our jobs. It's been a year.
And for me, that shift forced a lot of growth. Even though I don't have everything mapped out right now, I've actually noticed my stress has gone down just from not feeling boxed in all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, you know, even though drama follows you everywhere you go, right? Even when you change jobs. And just the other day I don't know if you can hear the airplane overhead, sorry. Just the other day I was venting to Paul, and I'm like, I vent, you're always going to vent, and there's always going to be things you don't like about your current situation, but I love where I'm at so much more than where I was before. I have so much more freedom. I work completely from home. And I feel like I've grown and learned so much because I am not just stuck in this box of, well, this is how we do it, and this is, what the way we do it, and when we do it, and the attitude we have when we do it. And I feel like I have so much more control and say over the types of work that I'm doing. So it's really fulfilling.
That's amazing. And I think that's exactly what it is. There's something about stepping into something new, even when it's uncomfortable, that forces growth because you're not operating inside the same structure anymore. You're actually figuring out what works for you. And I think that ties back to what we're just talking about with putting yourself in a box. Because sometimes you don't even realize how much something has been defining you until you step outside of it. And for us, one of those things were personality tests. Because our previous workplace really leaned into them. And at first, I was completely on board. I thought, great, this is going to help me understand myself better and maybe even guide my career. So, when you first took one, did you feel the same way?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely felt like it was really cool because when I took my test for our previous job, I actually took the test as part of the hiring process. So I think when you had started, it wasn't part of the hiring process at that point, but they added it in, and it was just really cool because I just felt like I was being hired based on not necessarily the skills, like the skills were going to be teachable, but kind of my internal skills, my internal personality, and my potential versus Um, do you know how to do A, B, and C? Well, I can be taught how to do A, B, and C, but do I have the potential to get there? And so I felt actually really good about it.
Yeah, and I felt that too at first. It actually felt exciting. Like someone was trying to understand you on a deeper level instead of just looking at what you could do on paper. And I think that's why personality tests are so appealing. They feel like something solid to hold on to, like you're finally putting words to things you've always felt but couldn't quite define.
Hmm.
But for me, that shifted pretty quickly once I started seeing how the results were actually being used.
Hmm.
Before DISC, we had taken the 16 personality test, which was based on a Meyer Briggs model. And that was interesting, but it was a lot for the company to adapt to. So eventually, everything moved to the DISC profiles. A quick pause for context. I think we got a little ahead of ourselves and didn't actually explain what DISC was. DISC is a personality framework with 4 types: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. The idea is to help you understand how people operate, what drives them, and how they tend to interact. Dominance is direct and results focused. Influence is outgoing and people driven. Steadiness is calm and consistent. Conscientiousness is detail oriented and analytical. It's meant to highlight strengths, weaknesses, and communication styles. In practice, though, it can also get used to put people into neat little boxes, which was more of our experience. But when I got my results, I was 100% S and like a 90% C and 0 I and D. And I was so upset about that because I wanted to be more extroverted, more in a leadership role. And the test was telling me I didn't have the skill set to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized that the way that it got interpreted, it was very narrow. It turned into this is a role you fit into instead of this is one part of how you operate. And I think that's where it started to feel off
Hmm.
because the test itself wasn't the issue, it was how it was being applied. It stopped being a tool for understanding and started being used to define people. I took the test multiple times, not because I wanted to understand it better, but because I didn't like what it said about me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, every time, and the result didn't change.
Yeah. So what's funny is you and I have basically the same disc result. I don't remember which way or the other, and I think at one point we did retake them as a company, and I think I went from like CS to SC or something like that between the two tests. But basically those two values are very high and similar for me as well. So,
Which is interesting because on paper, that would make it seem like we should operate the same way, but in reality, we have completely different personalities. And that's where I think something important gets missed with these types of frameworks. They can show patterns, but they don't capture
mhm.
nuance. As the intention behind DISC training should have been good. It was meant to help people understand how to communicate with different personality styles. So if someone is more steady or more analytical, you adjust how you approach them. If someone is more fast paced and outgoing, you meet them there. But what I saw over time is that it slowly shifted. Instead of let's understand each other better, it became this is how you need to be to talk to me. I expect you to change your approach so that I'm more comfortable. And that's a subtle difference, but it changes the dynamic completely because it's not really collaborative anymore. It becomes conditional.
Mhm. Yeah. There were a lot of issues that come from that stem from all of this, and something that I'm experiencing even right now with that ties back into my personality and the way that I do things is I find that as an SC or CS, basically as a very organized, efficient, task-oriented person, I find that people overly rely on me to a point where it's not boundaried. It is just basically taken advantage of me. And over the years I have gotten stronger and stronger at putting boundaries on that and saying no, like you can't treat me this way just because I'm kind of naturally built this way to get things done quickly and to find things quickly doesn't mean that you have an excuse not to do something yourself.
Yeah, and I experienced a very different side of that. For me, it wasn't as much about people relying on what I was good at. It was more about being judged for what I wasn't naturally wired to do. So I was in a leadership position, and I'm naturally more quiet, more reserved. I don't speak up
Hmm.
constantly. I don't feel the need to take over a room. And that got interpreted as a weakness. I wasn't an A player because I wasn't the loudest voice in the room.
Hmm.
Even while acknowledging that it wasn't my natural style, they still expected me to lead the way they wanted me to lead, the same way that they do. And that's where it started to feel like a contradiction. Because on one hand, it was, this is your personality. But on the other hand, it was, you need to act outside of this to be successful. So you're being defined one way, but evaluated another. And I had a hard time not pushing back on that because I believed I could do the role well in leadership. I didn't have to be loud and outgoing. I just wasn't going to do it the same way that someone else would. I didn't need to be the loudest person in the room.
Hmm. Yeah, they kind of put you in this box of like, we want you to do this role, but you have to do it our way. You can't do it your way. You have to do it our way.
Exactly. And that's what I find fascinating about it. We have a very similar scores, but completely different personalities, different approaches, different strengths. And that's the part that gets lost when you rely too heavily on something like this. It simplifies people in a way that feels useful, but isn't always accurate.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how they just kind of clump you all together. And what I also found interesting was that and maybe you can relate to this, but I found it very like, oh, I know you were a CS, but we need you to like work on your I, to work on your D, to talk to clients despite the fact that we know that's not your strong suit. You need to do that. But the expectation doesn't go the other way around. So people who are really good at talking to clients and all these things, they're not held to the standard of, well, you also need to be organized and efficient and all of these other things like Melissa. Like, but Melissa, she has to be everything she already is. Plus, you know, she needs to get over her anxiety because that's not real, right? And she needs to talk to clients and she needs to get out there and be vocal and extroverted and lead meetings and all of that.
Yeah, and that's where it started to feel contradictory because it wasn't just this is how you operate, it became this is who you are, but also not enough. And I think that's what made it confusing. You're being told this is your natural style, but then being told you need to be something completely different to succeed. So it creates this constant tension between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be.
Hmm.
And I don't think the issue was the personalities themselves, it was how they were being manipulated. Because instead of seeing different styles as equally valuable, it felt like certain traits were being ranked higher than others. And over time, that turns into something subtle but powerful. You stop developing your strengths and start trying to compensate for what you think you're lacking, not because it's necessary, but because it was expected.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then all of the people who, and I found this too, that it wasn't even just that these people who would get put into leadership early were I's and D's. It was that they were fresh too. We had other issues with, being kind of overworked and people claiming you're not being efficient when it's like, hey, I'm telling you I'm the most efficient person you'll ever meet. Like this is not the issue here. And then the people who are coming in fresh, new hires, they have a really great attitude because they're not being bogged down and overworked. These people get shot up into leadership positions when they don't even know how to, like the basics of how these campaigns work and the ins and outs of everything. And they get put in these positions. And I feel like, what about the people who've been here? What about the people who have a passion and can see the problems and the issues, but we're just having, the people who feel good about everything and the happy people. Like you got to take feedback from all sorts of walks of life. You can't just rely on the people with the good attitudes and the, the fresh perspectives because We need to see how everybody works together. Does that make sense? Am I rambling?
Yeah, and that ties into something else I noticed too. There was a tendency to prioritize energy over experience. And energy is important, but without context, it creates this blind leading the blind effect.
Hmm.
Because instead of asking, how do we support the people who are already carrying the weight, it became, how do we inject something new and hope it fixes the problem?
Yeah.
And I think that's where burnout really started to show up. Not because people weren't capable, but because they were constantly being stretched in ways that didn't align with how they operated.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you combine that with being told who you're supposed to be, it becomes really hard to trust your own instincts. It felt like there was this underlying expectation that you needed to sacrifice everything for the company to grow, and then maybe you'd grow after that. And burnout just wasn't acknowledged. It wasn't something that was addressed. It was something that was reframed as inefficiency. So you could be working a 40-hour week with expectations that didn't realistically fit into that time. And when it didn't add up, the conclusion wasn't that the workload was the issue, it was that you weren't doing enough. And that's where it started to disconnect for me because at a certain point, the math just didn't add up.
Nope, it doesn't math. Well, it's been a year, right? It's been a year since we've both left. I'm at a little over a year for you and just about the year mark for me. So we thought it would be fun if we came in here and took a completely new personality test. Let's see, has anything changed? Are our perspectives different now that we are away from that previous job that we were working at together? How has our personality impacted where we're at now? So, Jess, do you want to talk about the new personality test that we decided to take?
Yeah, so we decided to take a different approach this time and go with the Big Five personality test. And this one is still rooted in psychology, but instead of assigning you a type, it measures traits on a spectrum. So instead of saying this is who you are, it shows you where you fall across different dimensions of personality. There are 5 core areas: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Neuroticism.
That's a hard word. It's a hard word.
Which together are often referred to as the Ocean model.
Yeah.
And what I liked about this test is that it doesn't try to define you. It gives you a range.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you context. It shows you your patterns, but it still leaves room for interpretation and growth.
So, and I don't know if we want to give some examples of what some of the questions were. I have a couple pulled up here. I don't know if the questions I personally took a screenshot of here, they're the best kind of give you a view of what these questions are like. Some of them were kind of religious too. I believe my life holds a higher purpose. That's a very spiritual question, right? It's not how organized are you? This one that I found interesting that kept kind of repeating was this question. For example, it says here, I will do things for my loved ones before I do things for myself. And a lot of times if I was being really real with myself, I was like, no, I feel like I can't be helpful to my family or unless I've been helpful to myself, but also sometimes it's worded differently. Sometimes it was worded oh, for other people. Well, for other people maybe not so much, but then for family, for loved ones, yes. So it was interesting how the questions kind of tweaked a little bit and how your answer might differ depending on how they asked it.
Yeah, and I actually really liked that about it because it made the questions feel more layered instead of forcing you into a simple yes or no.
Yeah, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because for a while there, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. I wouldn't help people before I help myself. But then when it was loved ones, I was like, for sure. And that's just because I keep a really tight circle, right? So I don't, honestly, I don't have that many people that I interact with. It's just, me, my husband at home. And so I found that question particularly pretty interesting as it came up every time.
And I think that's what made this test easier to answer, honestly, because in a lot of the previous tests, the questions felt too absolute. It was are you this or are you that? And the reality is, most of the time, it depends. It depends on the situation, it depends on the people and your environment. So instead of feeling like I had to pick a version of myself, it actually let me respond based on context.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions for me was around being social. And my instinct was to say, nope, not me. But that's not entirely true. Because if I'm around people I know, people I'm comfortable with, I can be the loudest person in the room. I can joke around, I'm engaged, I'm present. But if I'm in a room full of people I don't know, I am the exact opposite. I'm quiet, I am observant, I'm taking everything in before I say anything. And I think that's an important distinction because it's not that I'm not social, it's that my behavior changes based on how safe or familiar the environment feels.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes for me, I'm the same as you on that, and then sometimes it also depends on just how big the group is. It could still be a really close knit, like I know all these people really well, but if the group is bigger, I kind of like take a little back seat and just kind of watch things unravel. I don't like to be the star of the show when it's a bigger group.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, when we took this test, we actually didn't look at each other's results ahead of time. And I'm really curious to see how they compare, especially since our DIS results ended up being so similar.
I know, I want to see if we got similar results like we did with disc.
Yeah, and I think that would be interesting is to walk through each of these traits, explain what they mean, and then talk about how they actually show up for us. And also whether we think those results would have looked different a year ago versus where we're at now.
Mhm. Mhm. So, do you want to look at the trait scores or the patterns?
Let's go with trait scores. I think that gives a clearer starting point.
Okay, let's go off the scores. Okay. So the just to remind everyone, we have openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So what did you get for openness? What's your percentage?
I am at a 96.
No way. I'm at 96%.
That's amazing.
We're the exact same. Okay. Why don't we go over quickly? Will I don't know if you have it pulled up. Will you tell us the breakdown of openness? Like, what does that mean? Oh, so here's a quick breakdown. Actually, I just found one. So, to quickly define it, what they've said here is how open you are to new ideas and experiences, which I want to let that sink in a little bit. We are 96% open to new ideas and experiences. And I feel like in disc perspective, being a CS, nobody would ever suspect that of us. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. And I think that's what makes it so interesting because on the surface, it looks like a contradiction. And I think where that comes from is how those DISC traits were explained to us. They're usually described as being more analytical, more structured, and more cautious when it comes to change.
Yeah, they don't like change. That's their biggest. We talked a lot about fears in our last job and how that associates with each personality. And a C and an S are fearful of change. This is the total opposite of that. We are open to new ideas and experiences. And I found that so interesting because I am like I'm totally open to changing my mind or to doing something new, trying something else, finding a better way to do something. Um, oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets a little misunderstood. It's not that we're closed off to change, it's that we just don't jump into it blindly.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to process it first. We might want to understand it, analyze it, and see how it fits before we commit to it. And once we do that, we're actually very open to doing something differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I started to recognize about myself more over the last year, because I don't think people would naturally describe me as open in that way. But one of the things I've actually come to really enjoy is unlearning, looking at patterns and habits, even parts of my identity, and asking, do I actually want to be this way? And being willing to change it if I don't. So it's not just openness for the sake of it, It's being intentional about what I choose to change and why.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like a lot of times we get put in this box of like, oh, we're kind of stubborn. We don't want to change. We don't want to do things differently. But I feel like that's just the analytical part of our brain going, you know what? Let me analyze this first. Let me understand it first. And then once I do, I'm on board. I'm all for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's exactly what it is. For me, it doesn't come from resistance. It comes from wanting to have a sense of direction, not control in the sense of forcing an outcome, but understanding what something could look like before stepping into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because once I can picture it, once I can process it, I'm actually very open to it. It's not overthinking or getting stuck. It's just needing enough clarity to move forward with intention.
Yeah, I think it's a safety thing. I feel that way too. I feel like my body and my mind crave control. And so, we'll have like habits that we do to kind of give ourselves a sense of that. But really it's just wanting this craving and sense of safety. You just want to make sure that everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think that ties directly into how this actually shows up for me. Because when I was looking at my results, there were a few things that really stood out.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was that I don't just see things, I interpret them. I tend to connect dots that most people don't notice, and I'm always looking for a few steps ahead. So it described it as being future oriented, idea driven, and meaning focused. And that felt very accurate.
Yeah, very future oriented and so much so for me myself. Like anxiety future oriented. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where it connects back to something I've always identified with, which is problem solving.
Mhm.
Because it's not just solving what's in front of you, it's understanding how things connect, what could happen next, and how to navigate that. And I think that fits really naturally into this idea of openness and not just being open to new things, but actively trying to understand them.
Mhm. Yeah. What about conscientiousness? I'll go first this time. I got 90%.
Mine is a 77.
Oh. Okay, there's a little difference there. Interesting. Okay, so for conscientiousness, it says how goal directed, persistent, and organized you are. I mean, I am the queen of organization, so I'm surprised it was not like 100% there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, I think what's interesting about this one is I don't know how many people would actually score 100% across the board, because at some point there has to be some level of flexibility in there too.
I know that would be crazy. I mean, we were pretty close with openness, but not quite there. So, yeah. I I'm interested. I want to see other people take this test too. I want to see how people rank on conscientiousness. I'm like, this is the organization one. I'm like, I want to see. I want to see.
Yeah. And I'll put a link to the test in the show notes too, because I'm really curious how other people score on this.
hmm Yeah, share your results. And maybe what surprised you about them. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
And this one actually made a lot of sense to me, but I think it would have looked different a year ago.
hmm
When I was in my last career, I had a defined structure. It was easier to stay disciplined because I didn't necessarily have a clear path of where I could go, but I knew what I could do. And I knew that I wanted to work towards something and I could try to follow it.
hmm
Now I have a lot more freedom, but with that comes more options, more ideas, and more directions that I have to go. And I think what's that show me is that it's not about a lack of discipline, it's a shift in how I have to apply it.
Yeah.
Because before my discipline came from structure, now it has to come from prioritization. And that's a very different skill. It's not about whether I can follow through, it's about choosing what's actually worth following through on.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was worried something like that was going to happen with me recently. I was just feeling like okay, like I'm getting more hours with my part-time work and I also want to put more hours into my side thing that I've got going on and kind of prioritizing and really figuring out okay, well, where should I put that time? Should I put more into this or less into that? And really balancing things out and playing with that balance as time goes on, because we can't just expect, going back to change, we can't just expect everything to stay the same all the time. We have to adapt, and as we adapt, it feels so good when you find a solution that still just works. And I feel like we have the capabilities of doing that. Um, we don't have to be stuck. We can find those solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where these traits actually start to work together. Because you have the openness and all the ideas, all the possibilities, but then you have the conscientiousness to decide which ones are actually worth following through on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should we move on to extroversion?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I feel like this is pretty obvious. Like, I I got a 42%. I'm not very extroverted.
Mine is only a 21%.
Wow, yours is so much lower. I don't know. See, I don't know. I have kind of an energized personality. I'm very positive. Let me read what they say about the Big 5 on this one. So, this is how much you are energized by the outside world. Now, I'm a homebody. I love being at home, but I also don't like being cooped up. So, um, I like to, get out, even if it's just run an errand and come home. It gives me just a little bit more energy. Go out for a walk, um, kind of like re-energize. But most of the time, this is kind of going into introvert, extrovert, right? So most of the time, I recharge by being alone and having quiet time. But other times, I enjoy being with other people. You just have to have control and kind of yeah, control, like, over how long you do that in order to recharge versus then it starts to drain, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to explain it because it's less about whether you're social and more about where your energy actually comes from. For me, I don't think that score means I can't be social. It just means I don't rely on it the same way. And I think part of that is natural, but part of it was shaped by experiences too.
Mhm.
There were definitely periods where I became really aware of how I showed up around people, and I started adjusting myself to make sure I wasn't too loud or too much or disruptive. So over time, being quieter didn't just feel natural, it felt safer.
Mhm.
And that's important to recognize because not all of our behaviors come from who we are at our core. Some of them come from how we learn to navigate certain environments.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that as a limitation anymore because what I connected with in this result is that I'm not fueled by people, I'm fueled by thought. I like to
Mhm.
process things deeply before I speak, and I don't need constant external input to feel grounded or okay. And I think that's just a different way of operating, not a lesser one.
Yeah. See, I need a little bit more validation than you. So I need people to be like, "You're doing a great job."
Yeah, and I think this also ties into creativity for me because there's a
Mhm.
big difference between isolation and loneliness, and I don't think people always separate those. There were definitely times where I chose to isolate, but I wasn't necessarily lonely.
Mhm.
And over the last year living on my own, I had to learn how to sit with that. And instead of letting it turn into disconnection, I used it as a space to create and to think and to understand myself better. So it wasn't about avoiding people, it was about learning how to be okay on my own first. And yeah, I probably didn't socialize as much as I could have, but I was learning how to do it in a way that actually felt right for me. And that's part of why I wanted to do this podcast because I like deeper conversations. I like different perspectives. And this gives me a way to connect in a way that feels natural to me.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Like, I mean, I'm married, I have my husband, but like, I want someone else to talk to too. It's nice to get a different perspective from somebody who you don't live with. So,
Yeah. And it's also what pulled me more into the psychology side of things.
yeah.
Because when I was younger, I didn't really think about any of this. But after everything we went through and being forced into that level of change, it became less of an interest and more of something I needed to understand. My
Hmm.
previous career ended very quickly. It wasn't planned,
Yeah.
and there was a lot behind it. And it really felt like one
Hmm.
of those moments where you either figure it out or you don't. And I made the decision that I didn't just want to get through it, I wanted to grow from it. I didn't want to just be in survival mode.
You wanted to thrive. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Should we move to agreeableness? So I before we go share our numbers on this one, let me go over what the big five says about it. So this is how much you put others' interests and needs ahead of your own. And if you remember, when we were kind of talking about examples of what the questions were, I felt like when I had this, I wasn't putting people's interests and needs ahead of my own. Like I felt like I wasn't answering that way. But I got a 77%.
I got 100% here.
100%. Oh my gosh, that so describes you though. Let me tell you something about Jessica, guys. Jessica was my supervisor at our the previous job that we've been mentioning, and let me tell you, I probably don't even know how many times, because she does it just so naturally, how many times she fought battles for me, how many times she went to bat for me, and I'm so thankful for that. Like she's just so like I when we were doing the describe yourself in one word, I was thinking, well, how would I describe Jessica? And I wouldn't quite say loyal, because it's not so much like loyal to something higher than to her, but I don't know the word. Maybe if you guys can think of good words in the comments, you can let us know. But she is just, she sticks by your side, but not yeah, I don't know. She's just the best. She's just the best, you guys.
That is really sweet of you, and I appreciate that. And honestly, that was probably the most rewarding part of my entire career.
Yeah.
It was never really about the title or the role or even the work itself. It was knowing that people felt comfortable coming to me, that every day someone is going to come into my office and trust me enough to ask for help or work through something, personal or professional. And that meant more than anything else.
Mhm.
Being able to support people, not just professionally, but personally, and build those relationships, that's what shaped who I am. And I don't think I fully realized that at the time. But looking back, those
Mhm.
conversations with you and everyone else, that's what actually drove my growth.
Yeah. It's a skill, and you practiced that skill and became really good at it. Really, really good at it. So, I know, like, I could just feel the support from you every time I met with you. So,
I love that. I'm going to save this and just play it back anytime I need a confidence boost. It's going to be my positive affirmation for the day.
listen to it on repeat every morning when you're doing like your skincare. Like you've got it in the background. You are amazing. You do 100% agreeableness.
Yeah. And I think something I've learned with that is there's also a balance to it. Because being highly empathetic and supportive is a strength, but without boundaries, it can start to work against you.
I get that. Yeah.
I've definitely seen that show up in my personal life, especially in relationships. Avoiding conflict, putting other people first, sometimes at the expense of myself. And that's something I'm still learning how to navigate. Because there's a difference between being supportive and losing yourself in the process.
Yeah. Boundaries are important. I believe in you. If you need help practicing, just let me know. I'm still practicing myself, but they're just so important. Yeah. All right. Are you ready for the last number 5, neurotism? Am I saying that right? Neurotism. Okay, this is not what's the other word that sounds like that? Neurotic. This is not narcissistic. That's what I was thinking. This is neurotism, okay? So this is how sensitive you are to stress and negative emotional triggers. That's very interesting to me. Very, very interesting to me, because I have um generalized anxiety. I take medication. I and maybe if I wasn't on medication, I would have a totally different result on this test. But mine came in pretty low. So low being not as sensitive to stress and negative emotional triggers. I got a 31%.
That's interesting. I'm at a 52.
Isn't that interesting? You would think that like it would be higher.
Yeah, I am right in the middle, which was actually
Okay.
surprising to
Mhm.
me because outwardly I tend to be pretty steady. I don't show extreme emotions. I don't get easily reactive. I stay fairly consistent, but internally there is a lot more chaos going there. A lot more anxiety.
Yeah, I feel like on the outside, you've probably experienced this too. I'm a very positive person. I look at the positive side in most situations, but I still suffer from a lot of stress and anxiety. I just kind of internalize it a lot, and it comes out in different ways, like physically and things. So, but like I said, I really think that this just shows my medication is working. If I had taken this while I was in a different place, like um uh, I don't know, when I first started that previous job that we're talking about, maybe like 6 months in, I had a huge spike in anxiety, and if I were taking this test then, you'd probably this would be off the charts for me. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think your environment plays a huge role in that. You could take this at a different point in your life and get completely different results depending on what you're going through at the time.
and it changes.
Exactly.
Yeah, versus the other one, I don't know if disc would change very much depending on when you take it. It's because like you were saying, it's this one's based more in psychology, and the other one's probably would you say based more on like I don't know, like habits and skills maybe? Skills? Skills? Yeah, and skills can be learned. Skills can definitely be learned, which which goes into my hot take, which we'll go into just a little bit later, I think. So,
I think DISC reflects more of how you behave and operate, where this feels more connected to your internal state and how you process things.
okay.
Yeah, and then when I look at all of these together, it feels less like
Mm-hmm.
separate traits and more like a pattern. For me, it's like I'm very reflective, very internally driven, and I tend to process things deeply.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have the ability to stay structured and follow through when I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I'm very aware of other people, how they feel, how they think, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where I have to be mindful not to prioritize others at the expense of myself. So it's not that any one of these traits defines me, it's how they all interact that actually matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the growth comes from learning how to balance that without losing yourself in it.
Yeah. I would love to see I would love to see the other spectrum, right? Like because we're both kind of in the same realm personality wise, and it was interesting to see where we differ on this scale versus on the disc scale where we were much more similar. But I would love to see how someone who would have ranked high in either I or D on disc would rank on this system.
Yeah, that would actually be really interesting to compare.
We should enlist someone. Let's find an old coworker who has high I and D and throw them on the podcast and say, "Hey, take this test."
We'll have to, yeah, I might have a few people in mind.
We're going to hunt them down. We're going to find someone real good. All right. So, any final thoughts on how your personality, strengths, skills, weaknesses, how they've changed since this last year of quitting your main job and starting kind of fresh with a new career? Any big changes you've seen in yourself?
I think the biggest change for me has been my willingness to step outside of my comfort zone. Because before, there was a strange kind of comfort in the stress. It wasn't that I was happy, but it was
Mm-hmm.
familiar. It was like, I can handle this. I know how to operate here. And I think that's something people don't always talk about. You can get comfortable in something that isn't actually good for you just because you know how to survive in
Mm-hmm.
it. And that shift in deciding that I didn't want to just survive anymore, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted something that actually made me feel proud and aligned with who I truly am. So I chose to step into something new, even though I was scared.
Yeah.
And I think that's what changed. Not that I suddenly have everything figured out, because I don't, by the way, but that I was willing to move forward without having it all figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a very freeing experience for me. And I don't know. I feel like I am just in a position now where I'm under a lot less stress, and I feel like I have the mental capacity to really lean into myself as a person. One example of this is over the past 3 years, I have done a vision board for myself. And I think you've seen two of these vision boards because the last two that I did before 2026 would have been while I was working that previous job. And I remember being excited about it and being like, yeah, I'm going to do a vision board for myself, for me personally, not for work or anything. And over the past 3 years, my vision boards have changed drastically from these very curated, hardly any color pictures, very like professional looking, to very fun 90s millennial nostalgic like energy in these mood boards. And maybe, I don't know if there's a place where we can post these where everyone can see these, but you can just see myself coming back into my personality. Um, and really finding a sense of belonging within myself. It is just crazy how, and I really, I attribute that back to being in a space where I have the mental capacity to be me and not just survive, but to thrive.
I love that. That actually makes me think of something.
Hmm.
When we used to talk about dreaming big, it was a value that we put together at our old job. It never felt comfortable thinking beyond what felt realistic. So I'm curious, now that you're in a different place, do you feel like you're dreaming bigger than you were before?
Um, I wouldn't really say that I'm dreaming bigger. I still feel, because I feel like there is so much to be said about a small little dream. And for me, something that I have been prioritizing and really building upon over the last 3 years has been romanticizing my life and just really embracing every moment of free time and even just work time. Like, I try to make work time more relaxing and more I have the freedom of working from home, so I can throw some really nice cozy music on. I can have the TV on in the background or something and just feel more relaxed. And now I've lost my train of thought and I don't know where I'm going. But repeat your question. Do you remember? Oh, big dreams, big dreams. Oh, okay. I feel like the small dreams are almost more important than the big dreams because you can have a big dream and you can achieve that. But what's the point if you're not enjoying all the little pieces that get you there? So that I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I don't want to discount small dreams.
Small
Yeah.
dreams. I actually love
Yeah.
that. Because I think there's a tendency to think that bigger automatically means more important, but that's not always true.
It's not always about grandiose, I mean, schemes and, you know, all these big, big things. It's the little things in life that make it worth living. So,
And I think that's where perspective really comes into play. Because something that feels small to one person can feel huge to someone else. Not everyone has the same
yeah.
experiences, the
Mhm.
same resources, or the same starting point. So
Mhm.
you can't really measure a goal by how it looks from the outside. You have to look at it what it means to the person living in it. Your internal happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different for every person and yeah, and I feel like it also kind of ties into emotions. Some people have emotional dreams, like they want to feel a certain way, and other people have monetary dreams. They want to earn a certain amount of money, and I don't think you can really compare the two and be like mine's bigger, or better, just because mine's about money and yours is about happiness or something. It's just different.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. If it matters to you, then it matters. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else.
Yeah, then it matters. Yeah, if the money makes you happy, good for you.
All right, so what is your hot take?
My hot take. Okay, we're ending today with a hot take. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I think it does tie in really well with the personality test. And I've worded it different ways over the past couple of weeks as I've been thinking out a bit out figure sorry, can't talk. As I've been thinking about it. The way I wrote it in the show notes was everything is figure outable. Um I don't know if we're going to be family friendly on this podcast, Jessica, but I'm about to swear, okay? Be a grown ass adult and figure it out. Do it yourself and Google it if you have to, okay? So the reason this is my hot take is because I'm finding, I mentioned a little bit earlier, that people are relying on me to do things that they could figure out on their own. It's not necessarily my job to do this thing. Oh, I need this link and I can't log into my account to get it. Well, that's a you problem. You can't log in, or I need this and I can't find it. Well, I've given it to you 3 times already. So why can't you find it? Are you making the effort to find it? So just very like people are taking advantage of like my organizational skills, and I'm like, you're an adult, you're a grown ass man, figure it out. Like, and don't blame me when you're embarrassed because you couldn't get to something in time or do something properly in front of another person because I didn't help you, because you got to help yourself, okay? And it goes back to that double standard, right? Like I'm expected to be like, well, even though I'm introverted and I prefer to be at home and working on tasks, I still need to be really presentable in front of a client. I still need to be able to talk to them and be a social human being, but you can't be just like a little bit more organized. Come on. Come on. So that's my hot take.
I like it. Mine's a little different, and it's more focused on the personality test side of things. I think personality tests are really useful for awareness, but they can be extremely dangerous when they're turned into identity. Because awareness shows you your patterns, it helps you understand how you think, how you operate, where your strengths are, and where you might want to grow. But identity locks you into those patterns. You go from, this is how I tend to operate, to this is just who I am. And once that happens, you stop questioning it. You stop challenging it. You stop growing outside of the box that you're put in. So the problem isn't the personality test. It's when you stop using it as a tool and start using it as a conclusion. And I think the other side of that too is that it doesn't just impact how you see yourself. It impacts how other people see you. Because once those results are out there, people start filtering you through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it's important to keep it flexible. It's not a fixed definition. It's just more information. Something you can use, adjust, and grow from, not something that defines you permanently.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
And at the end of the day, it really comes down to self-awareness.
It's so important to be self-aware. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that's a whole other layer we didn't even get into, is emotional intelligence, which honestly could be its own full episode.
Yes. And that's something we definitely talked about at our last job. It was kind of towards the end there. And I'll be honest, they gave us a book and I didn't read the book. I was like, no way am I reading this book. So
yeah, and I think one of the challenges with things like emotional intelligence tests, or really any personality assessment, is that they can be easily manipulated if you're answering based on how you want to be perceived instead of what's actually true.
They answered the questions the way they thought they needed to be answered versus how they actually are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something to keep in mind with any of these tests, because if you're not answering honestly, you're not getting insight. You're just reinforcing the image.
Definitely. Which, if you're taking one of those hiring things, great. But if you're actually wanting to be productive by taking one of these tests, then that's not how you want to do it. So it's been so much fun.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. All right, I'll go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you for listening to Life Happens and Then You Die with myself and Melissa. It's been a wild ride. If this episode made you think about yourself a little differently or call out a pattern you didn't want to look at, then we probably did our job.
Maybe.
If you haven't already, follow or subscribe so you don't miss on the next episode. We don't know what the topic will be yet, but it will be there. It'll be chaotic, raw, and probably not family friendly.
There was only one swear word this time, but you know,
Okay, we're starting soft.
we can get pretty sassy.
And if you're feeling brave, take a personality test and share results with us. Not just the scores, but how you see yourself in them.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.